Welcome back from the 4th of July and everything, all the craziness that went on with Elon and Trump and everything else. Welcome back to the Rebel's Edge, folks. We're about to kick it off. Another great quarter coming up, of course, and of course, a brand new month. We've got all of that to cover and more. Little Dave Portnoy thrown in. There's a teaser on the Rebel's Edge. Bang. Bang.
Hey, you don't got everything in there, man. Where are all the tools?
I don't have the clapper. I'm here in Chicago. I'll be flying out to New York, Pete, later this afternoon. And I'll be on Charles Payne's show tomorrow.
Oh, nice.
With the big man.
Yeah.
But yeah, I had to be in Chicago for a physical, which of course includes a prostate exam. And I'll tell you what you don't want to hear, Pete. When you ask the doctor, where should I hang my pants? And he says, right over on the hook next to mine.
All right, let's move on.
I told him that one too, Pete, and he's like, yeah, I've heard them all.
Oh, that's pretty damn good, actually.
All right. Well, let's dive right in, Pete, to a little macro sentiment, which is, we're down 0.5% on all three major indices. Mm-hmm. Volatility's moved back up into the 17s. Oh. We told you about that last week, all the decay that would occur, folks. Mm-hmm. But basically, the government announcement on new tariffs, Pete, the question is it going to be a July 9th story? In other words, a Wednesday story? Or is it going to be way out to August 1st because that's when they kick in? There'll be a little pushback, I think, from some people on this, but I'm going to say we'll react on Wednesday, but then everybody will cross their fingers till the 1st.
I think you're exactly right, John. I totally agree. I see this as a July 9th. All right, this is already getting pushed to August 1st. And to be honest with you, John, we've heard a lot of commentary even about Labor Day itself, right? So even further out. And as long as there's progress, as long as there's negotiations, I think that's just fine. Was there a line in the sand? Not really. There was just a line that was put out there. I think that it's okay that it's getting pushed back a little further because I didn't think it was realistic that we could get that done, John, in that short of a period of time when you consider how many different countries we were talking about. So I think this makes a lot of sense. And I would say August 1st is fine. And I'd also say Labor Day would be probably even more fine because I think you're going to get a much better opportunity to get a lot more countries taken care of.
Sure. Well, under fantastic futures, Pete, I'm going to say maybe a little, I don't really care so much about what bonds are doing today. They're not doing much. So I'm going to focus in on oil and saying, hey, it's having a little bit of a rebound. I mean, once there were not oil fields burning and the Straits of Hormuz closed, oil kind of went to the back burner, so to speak. But it's percolating back up. It's got a 67 handle on it. What do you got today?
Well, I'm going to jump right on top of that, John, and talk about that oil volatility index itself, that OVX. And what I'm interested in is if you just go back to mid-June, this thing has dropped like a rock since then. And it just keeps dropping and dropping and dropping. Now, today it's up a little bit. It's up like 6 or 7%, getting it back all the way up towards 40, 47, somewhere in there, John. It's interesting. That certainly stands out. And then, of course, you mentioned the volatility index itself and the fact that we're up into the 17s. Ooh, well, that's not so bad. And, we obviously had the weekend that we had, the long weekend we had. And that's why I think they were trying to press that thing a little bit and try to figure it out. And they had it down in the 16s. But this is the range that we are in right now, John. It's been there for a couple of weeks at least 2 weeks or so, where we're somewhere between, call it 16 and 1750. And that's about where we find ourselves. Although I think we've gotten a little higher than 1750, but we're certainly underneath 18 still on the VIX.
All right, Pete, let's take a look at WINS, WNS. It sounds a little bit like Win, the gaming company, but no, this is business, basically more productive business software and so forth. Capgemini decides, you know what? We're going to pay $3.3 billion for this company. And basically, it's an all-cash offer, Pete, which tend to be among the most favored by those of us who don't like, carrying all kinds of other debt and other shares. I like this deal, and it seems like they're going to be accretive almost immediately. So pretty big deal, $3.3 billion to kick off a new quarter.
Another big deal, another reason that you look at the financial world, John, and just wonder, because the financials have really been performing extremely well, right? I mean, whether it's JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs or Morgan Stanley, Citi, Bank of America, all those various names having a great, that second quarter has been absolutely phenomenal. So, and they're going to be kicking it off, these financials, pretty quickly as far as the earnings go. But yeah, this is a big acquisition, $3.3 billion. And Capgemini is pretty excited about this. And when you look at it, John, I think there's a lot of reasons, like you said. You've got synergies that are there. It's going to be this is a strong move, I think, for 2025. The enhancement capabilities of agentic AI is what they say. Autonomous AI is what they say. So complex business processes is what they're working on. That's going to be pretty impressive. I like this move. And again, the acquisitions, the IPOs, they just keep happening, and everybody wants to turn their head from it, but that's the reality, and that's why these financials are ripping.
Well, take a look then at Tesla, Pete, a stock that is not ripping, or unless we are short it, and then we're saying, oh, it's ripping to the downside, because, Donald Trump and Elon Musk have famously had a great friendship, and then they've kind of gone their separate ways, came back. Now they're going their separate ways again, I guess. And Pete, shares are down almost 7%. But one of the things that I thought you and I could focus on is we've got Dave Portnoy, the Barstool El Presidente. And he is a guy that puts his money where his mouth is, whether it's Michigan football, whether it's, the Philadelphia Eagles, whatever. He's going to drop a big number, and he has. He's allegedly, Pete, putting $10 million down on a bounce out of Tesla because it sold off pretty hard. Again, 7%. That's a big drop. You're picking it up $21 cheaper than where it was last week. And it was a little bit rough last week. So I think he's not wrong, Pete, to play this. But as you and I would say, it's not an option to just trade stock, Dave. So real quick, I'll lay it out like this. Instead of buying $10 million worth of stock, what if he bought under $500,000 in options? He could buy the 295 calls in August and sell against those 1-to-1. He could sell the 335s. So 295, 335, it's a 40-point spread. He pays $13. That's $1,300 per option, per spread, $1,300. Now, the nice thing here is, Pete, that he's got a lot less risk because it's $429,000 worth of option premium. He'd have to buy about 330 of these because 33,000 shares, that simulates a $10 million position as of today. And Dave, I'm telling you, you'd like it a lot more because you'd make nearly $800,000 on the trade, and you didn't have to risk 10 million to do it. You only had to risk 429,000. That's the power of options, right, Pete?
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's something that a guy like Dave, who has obviously, been rising higher and higher in terms of his knowledge of the stock markets, he's done a really great job with this whole thing. And it all started way back when during COVID, right? I mean, that's when things really started to kick off for him. And he's done a magnificent job and continues to do a great job with what he's doing. When he's not going out and testing out pizza somewhere, he's still back in the stock market or whatever.
Just one slice, just one bite.
Just one bite. But, by the way, going back to the American Party thing, you and I were kind of kicking this around, and I'm curious why we even want to, introduce another group. We've got the two. You got the Democrats, you got the Republicans, and then all of a sudden, and of course we got independents, but now all of a sudden we have an American Party. I'm not really sure. I think that Elon, if I'm Elon, I'm going to be focused far more on how frustrated I probably am with the president, but trying to figure out different ways where I'm going to be able to execute properly because of those cuts with those EV subsidies that they'd had. And that's really a big part of why there's such this, butting of heads right now going on with Trump and with Elon, which is, it's too bad. They did seem like they had a pretty good relationship, right? I mean, between Elon and his son being in the Oval Office, it seemed like that was like a daily event for those guys. But it's interesting. I do like the Dave Portnoy trade. I think that's a very smart trade, would be to take a look at what those options would give you and provide for you and put you in a pretty interesting position. So I really like that a lot, John. I think that makes a lot of sense. And maybe maybe that's where his next footsteps is over into the options world. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, Dave, if you want to come on board, or if you want us to help you out with some trades like this, I know you're a real trader. I have no doubt. Yep. I mean, the guy puts his money where his mouth is, but I don't think he's really explored options the way he should, Pete. Right. And that's why I think you and I'd be excited to say, hey, Dave, come on over. Yep. We'll work with you any way you like, because he could really be the Pied Piper for options, Pete, that
yep.
guy.
Absolutely.
All right, let's dive into one more or two more stocks, Pete. Let's go here to BitMine, which is a really interesting story because BitMine, as the name implies, it's a mining, stock for digital assets, cryptocurrencies. And what these guys are trying to do, Pete, is really hit the ground running with their Ethereum plays. The company plans to raise 250 mil to invest in Ethereum. We've seen a lot of people raising money like GameStop to invest in Bitcoin. This one decides, you know what? Let's get Tom Lee, the strategist, involved, and let's make him the CEO. Now, some of you might think that's crazy. I think Tom Lee is a brilliant guy. He's really been on board the digital asset train. So I think this might really help them, Pete. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Tom Lee's been the one guy, John, and guys used to laugh at him at certain four-letter stations, when he'd come on and talk about, well, he's so calm all the time, but he stands there and he's like, well, 3,000, I think we could get to 5,000, maybe 20,000 in the not too distant future, all the rest of that. Well, who's been right the most? Tom Lee. I mean, the time frame, he never said it was going to happen the next day. He just said, I see this as what it looks like into the future. And he's also never stopped getting more and more bullish the further up it's gone too. So whether it's at 100,000, John, and then all of a sudden, like so many, but he's been there this whole ride. He's talking about 150,000 or maybe 200,000. So he has been very, very attached to that. I find it interesting, though, that very much like a MicroStrategy was doing with Bitcoin, I find this one pretty interesting that rather than Bitcoin, he's actually going to Ethereum. That makes it, pretty intriguing because I don't know, has anybody else been going that route, John? I don't know. Maybe there has been, but it seems to be that everybody's been kind of putting their money more towards Bitcoin than Ethereum. So this gives them that much more of a chance with BitMine and the whole blockchain technology. I find it really fascinating, and I think Tom Lee's going to do a great job, quite frankly.
I do too, Pete. I do too. Tom, he's a great friend of ours, and we look forward to speaking with you about this, Tom.
Yeah.
So keep flying the colors and doing the Lord's work, Tom. All right. CoreWeave, Pete. C-O-R-Z. CoreWeave and Core Scientific, because Core Scientific is C-O-R-Z. Apparently, big data center infrastructure provider. Somebody decides, yep, I want that, and they're going to take them out, Pete. Another deal, just like you've said, deal after deal after deal, and their agreed upon exchange ratio basically puts about a $9 billion value on this one, Pete. So again, I think this is exactly what we're going to see more of as we go through the second half of 2025.
I completely agree with you. And this Core Scientific, John, these rumors have been out there for a while. These stocks have been moving for a while to the upside. So I think for the people out there that are wondering, well, why are they going down? I think it's just because they had made such a rapid move to the upside, specifically talking about CoreWeave, John. This thing, when it IPO'd, which was not that terribly long ago, all it's done is go up 300%. So the fact that maybe it pulls back 3 or 4% on an acquisition, and they've had all of these levels that they have been hitting, I find it pretty interesting. I think it makes a heck of a lot of sense. I think Core Scientific is down today as well. But when you look at where it was not too terribly long ago, late April, John, it was trading beneath $6.50, and here it is trading at 15, 16 bucks, something like that. So very, very interesting that they are they're going to get this thing done, it looks like. And like you said, $9 billion in equity value. I would say this is becoming a pretty monstrous group right here on this merger.
Well, let's take a look, Pete, at a very interesting guy because you've known a lot of guys who were long snappers. And if they're a long snapper, they're generally speaking a linebacker or an offensive lineman. Seems like one or the other. And the long snappers aren't usually the 300-pound variety. They're usually, that's why they end up being linebackers in some cases, Pete, because it's a way you can hang around football for a long time and get paid a lot of money. And this gentleman did exactly that. Was in 200 NFL games.
Wow.
That's pretty damn good.
Yeah.
But he had a little ritual that he would do, and I think you guys will enjoy listening to it.
I get out of heart surgery, and everybody wants to interview, Real Sports, Ellen, everybody. And they all ask me the same two questions.
He's got a good voice.
The first one was, your career just ended, right? You're at the top of your game. Do you miss it?
There he was with the Saints.
And man, I didn't even have to think twice. When I was a kid, I lived in Seattle. It was King Griffey Jr., Jay Buhner, Edgar Martinez. They were my heroes. And when I lost both my parents, the community would donate tickets.
Edgar Martinez, he's a client.
My sixth grade school teacher
would
take me to games. And we sat in section 305 of the Kingdom, and I had a
Our guys on Rebellion Wealth manage money for Mr. Martinez.
In my mind, Griffey and Buhner would just be hanging out in the outfield, and then all
tell you what, that former stadium was a pretty cool stadium in Seattle, by the way.
Bring him down here to warm us up. Let's sign him on the Mariners right now. He's going to be our good luck charm. That never happened, right?
That never happened.
So I think it was August 14th, my first game. I get picked up by the Buffalo Bills, and I'm running out of the tunnel against the Rams. And when I pick my head up, there's signs that say, "We love you, Drew Bledsoe." And then there was this kid leaning over the wall, and it was me as a kid. So I picked up a ball, and I walked over to this kid, and I was like, "Kid," he goes, "Holy cow, yeah?" I got a big problem.
How great is that? How great is that?
What problem could you have? You're the magic guy, you know?
You're the magic guy.
I can't tell anybody, but I don't think anybody's good enough here to warm me up. Do you think you can help me out?
Nobody here is good enough to warm me up.
So now I'm on the field with this kid.
Can you help me out? I'll tell you what, those guys who can snap the ball too, they get that ball back there fast.
I played catch with
200 It's kids. Amazing.
And before every game I played in, I got a kid, and I played catch with him for just a few minutes. And it was my moment of giving gratitude, appreciation. It was my moment of reflecting, of being motivated by coaches that gave me opportunity when I might have been a little too small, a little
thinking
too
of all
short,
the people that touched their lives up. Pretty great. I mean, they always hear the bad things. They never hear the good things.
Yeah.
The game's good.
And it's not, and it's a little more involved than just going up and handing the kid a ball in the stand. Bring him down on the field. Let him, toss the ball back and forth with you. And look at this. Here's some parents sent pictures.
And I believe this, man.
Pretty cool.
We got this 12-year-old that lives inside of us, the one that thinks anything's possible. Let that be an inspiration to you to make the world a better place. Never forget what it's like to be a kid. Never forget what it's like to look through the eyes of a kid and just be amazed at how cool this world is.
It's awesome.
So, you know what I miss? I miss playing catch with my 12-year-old self.
Pretty great. You got the cheering crowd too. That's awesome. That's awesome.
Well, what do you got on Rebel Sports today, Pete?
All right. So here's a question for you, John. When is old too old, right? And I don't know that there's always just the age itself, but is Pete Carroll the right guy for the Raiders job? And I only say that for this reason.
Okay.
Pete Carroll is now 73 years old. So, does he have the energy? And here's my response would be, his energy is as high now as I've ever seen it. I'm going back to the days of being at USC, Seattle Seahawks, Minnesota Vikings. He had some down years too when he gotten hired by some of the other teams that he was a coach of. But John, the guy at the point in time when I played for Pete Carroll with the Vikings, he was the youngest coach in football. Now he's, I think, the oldest of all the coaches in the NFL at 73 years old. But the other day I saw some great video of him. He was pretending to do all-star wrestling type stuff and moves with some of the players as they're laying on the ground, stretching out and all that. And he's jumping on top of them and grabbing their legs and fooling around and having a good time and just making it, less dull, right? Sitting there, laying out there, stretching and all the rest of it. And, he's a guy who comes with a lot of energy and it's pretty cool. And they have built a team, John, that I think is going to be probably more competitive than a lot of people are thinking they are. And I think it can happen pretty quick. And when you've got a really good coach, which I think Pete is, and you've got Geno Smith, who was his quarterback, and he really liked him when he had him up in Seattle. And Geno has had the second half of Geno's career has been absolutely outstanding. First half average, second half, he's been phenomenal. So he went out and he decided, hey, look, I'm going to get Geno down here. Oh, and maybe get Ashton Genty, maybe the best running back we've seen in quite a long time coming out of college, John. They did that as far as the draft is concerned. They got a tight end named Brock Bowers, who had more catches than just about every wide receiver had last year. And then they got Jacoby Myers, a wide receiver, who also did pretty well. I think he got over 1,000 yards, almost 1,100 yards last year too. So in a division with Kansas City, Denver, the Chargers, and then the Raiders, I'm just going to say this, John. I think Pete Carroll, if he can get a little bit of magic and avoid injuries, and all these are ifs, but I think they can be pretty damn competitive in that league, in that conference. I think it's going to be really, really interesting because you get into these divisional things and you got to play them twice a year. So they got to go up against Kansas City. They got to go up against the Chargers, who I think are, I said it last week. I got a lot of flack from people when I said, you know what? I think they take the division. I still do. But you know what? I almost wonder if the Raiders make a couple of steps higher too, John. And that might mean Kansas City. And I'm not negative on Kansas City, but sometimes you just, you've been there, and then all of a sudden it's not quite there. And that's maybe where Kansas City is. I like what Pete Carroll's doing, though, with Vegas.
Well, I think, Pete, that when I look at the Raiders, they've had a series of guys that are perhaps good coaches, but not great head coaches.
Right.
And that's really been one of the many problems of the Raiders. Now they also have two guys in Tom Brady and their general manager who are a little more focused rather than just trying to please, Al Davis's son, who's the, majority guy at the Vegas Raiders. I think they're really out there. They're in it to win it. Mm-hmm. And Pete Carroll is in it to win it. I think a lot of the other coaches were just there saying, I wonder how long I can hang on here before, Al Davis's son decides I'm done. And there were a lot of those, Pete. I mean, there were 3 or 4 of those in a row where you're just like, what the heck? And, then they just get rid of them and they'd pay $100 million to some guy just to go away and things like that. It's been a off the rails for a while in Vegas. This might help get them back on the right track.
Yep. And they've had some year. I mean, obviously going back to Rich Gannon, but that's going back a little ways, getting him to the Super Bowl and that type of thing. But yeah, they lost their way for a while with coaches. I think Pete Carroll actually is about as perfect a coach as you'd want. I mean, the head coach just has to give you that great story and that lead in from the locker room before the game, right? And that type of thing. But when you've got all the coaches that Pete brought along with him, John, I think that's what's going to be, the difference maker. They're going to be a different Raiders team, I think, this year. So could be pretty interesting. How about this? College football. So Clemson. Who has talked about Clemson being anything in 2025? I haven't heard it at all because all we ever hear, John, is, well, in the ACC, well, it's places like Miami, maybe it's SMU. They all go to different names, but nobody ever talks about Clemson. And all Clemson did last year, John, was they went 10-3. They went 7-1 in the conference. They got, by the way, their quarterback back, who was one of the best quarterbacks last year, quite frankly, and probably – given what he did last year, if he can do something similar this year, he's got a good shot at the Heisman Trophy and maybe being one of the first guys picked in the entire draft. Cade Klubnik. I mean, he had 36 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. Not very many guys throw 36 touchdowns without having at least double-digit interceptions. But this guy with only 6, it tells you he must be pretty damn accurate, must be pretty smart in how he does his reads. And I just think that with Dabo Swinney, I don't know why everybody kind of sleeps on Clemson and they just sort of keep pushing them back and pushing them back. And I know there's the SEC and the ACC and the Big 12 and Big 10 and all the rest of this. And by the way, the Pac-12 is back. I don't know if you saw that, but they are now, I think they're up to 9 teams, John. Every one of those teams, however, does have state after the name of them. And Texas State just went in. So, but at least the Pac-12 is not just two schools anymore. So they've added on. But what do you think about Clemson? Why do you suppose? Is it because Dabo's so pushed back about a lot of things? He's not a huge fan of all the things that I think you and I are not huge fans of, right? I mean, NIL, they've done it wrong. And the free agency version of what they do, the portal, I think they've completely screwed that up. And he does not participate in that. And yet he wins 10 games last year. What do you think of him? What do you think of Dabo? Can he do it this year?
He could, Pete. He sure could. And to have a quarterback with that kind of experience and potential, that's, something that, and playing in Death Valley too, which is of course what they call their home field. That is a tough place for any team to go into. Doesn't matter how good you are when you play them in Death Valley. That's a tough place to play. But I'll throw another 10-game winner at you, Pete. Illinois.
Yeah.
Because Illinois' got a quarterback that really did a great job for them last year. His name's Luke Altmaier. And he, they won 10 games. They went to the Citrus Bowl, won the Citrus Bowl. They are a dark horse in the Big Ten, I think, right now, Pete. And the Big Ten ain't just 10 teams, of course. It's just loaded with teams with all the transfers that you talked about from, for instance, the Pac-12 and so forth. I think that this could be just a very good Illini team this year. And I don't know who they got in the portal and how good those people are, but the players they've got, just like Clemson, are players that want to be there. And that makes a huge difference. I'm not saying you can't win with portal players. Of course you can, and many have. But I think this is a pretty interesting move to have another Big Ten team, just like Indiana last year, folks. Remember them. Everybody thought, Indiana, really? Well, they were pretty damn good. Now, did they lose to Ohio State pretty good? Yes, they did. But that was their, big stage that they were on, and they might be there again, and Illinois might be there as well.
I totally agree with you. I was going to say that about Indiana. I mean, everybody slept on Indiana, but they were pretty damn good. Good quarterback, good coach, and, that was just his first year. So usually coaches get a little bit better over the next couple of years after that. We'll see if Indiana's like that. And Minnesota, by the way, had a monster 2026 signings, which doesn't have anything to do with this year, but it just gives you a little bit of an idea. There are some names out there that are starting to really move around, John, that I think can get more and more competitive. So that makes the Big Ten that much better.
Well, folks, we thank you for tuning in to the first broadcast of the Rebels Edge in the third quarter that just kicked off today. We'll see exactly what ends up happening with the American, what does he call it, Pete? Elon call it the American something.
American Party.
American Party. We'll see what happens with that, what happens with Trump and Elon going at each other, and what happens with this big, beautiful bill now that it's been signed into law. Let's see what happens.
Yep.
So we hope all of you will join us tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And until then, Pete and I wishing you a very good trading day.